channel is sponsored by Great Bay Outfitters. Great Bay Outfitters is a waterfront kayak shop located near Great Bay. They are New Jersey's #1 volume dealer of Old Town kayaks. Great Bay Outfitters specializes in fishing kayaks and offers demos, rentals, repair, rigging, and a full assortment of PFDs, dry suits, motors, paddles, and accessories from many major brands. What is up, everyone? Today's video, I'm going to be going out and targeting striped bass in tidal creeks. A lot of what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to kind of discuss and break down in this video. But before I get to that, let me show you some of the clips from today. So in this video, it was mid-December, ton of wind, so a perfect day to honestly do some tidal creek hopping. Typically these areas are a little bit more protected from the wind than, open bays. But let's get to the first spot and we'll talk about what we're going to do. Alright, so primarily today I'm going to be fishing just a 1/4 ounce jig with a Slam Shady paddle tail. Been trying a ton of different, profiles, lures recently, and they really haven't been living up to the build. I guess you would call this my safety lure. Like usually on a slow day, this is what will produce for me. Gonna stay in these creeks to get away from the wind and probably just cast on some points. If it doesn't seem like we're catching much off the points or off of like the breaks, we'll probably do some jigging. But stay tuned, I should be in the first creek soon. Alright, let's start here. Cast along this point. See if anything's sitting on the corner first. There's a fish. There's a fish, let's go. Tighten that drag a tad. Alright, that's a good feeling, because we've had an extreme temp drop, man. I'm gonna cut the motor. Water temp dropped significantly the last 2 weeks. It was warm forever and then all of a sudden just dropped. Get the net. When it's, sub 25 degrees out, and you got maybe weeks left of the season, fish like this makes your day. Because I'll tell you what, man, you don't realize it. It's not a big fish, but man, I can't even feel my hand that I'm netting with. Oh man. On a day when it's as cold as it is today, not catching fish, man, it makes you realize how cold it really is. That's actually a beautiful looking bass. But let's get him back in the water. Water's actually warmer than the air by a good amount. All right, we picked up a bass here. See if there's another one hanging. Well, I'm kind of stuck on this little corner here. I mean, you could see the ice on the meadow, it's pretty cold. There we go. There we go. Little guy. Wow, he hit it right at the kayak. Or kayak. I'm losing my mind. Boat. Alright. I was about to hang it up for the year because, November was, well, look at that. He has sea lice on him. That's pretty cool. That guy's got to be freezing. November was extremely warm, and then December we paid for, our warm fall. It literally, we had like 2 solid weeks in the 20s, which dropped the water temp down to
you know, mid to low 30s. And I've always been a believer, man, when you get an extreme temp change, it's usually not very good for fishing, especially a temp drop. I'll take the increase. Even in the summer, I notice when we get like a, you know, heat wave and the water temp jumps a ton, it could definitely change up the bite. But extreme temp drop usually doesn't bode well for fishing, at least in my experience. And the last time I was out striper fishing and did really well, the water was, you know, low 50s, high 40s. There's a fish. Let's go. This first fish on the Sahara. I do like the knob a little bit better than the Sedona, if I'm being honest. Man, nothing like December bass fishing, man. Little guy. Nothing on that first cast. Try a little further in. Oh, a little too far in right there. There's a fish. Oh, must have been sitting right there. That's always a good feeling. Not a big guy. I'm curious if he hit the top teaser or nah, he's on the jig. That is a beautiful fish. All right. Nice little backwater bass. Got a little speck of mud on him. Let's get him back in. It's way too cold out here.
All right. So if you just watch those clips, you might have a handful of questions, and I'm hopefully going to answer them in these next few segments. But targeting fish like this is not very tough. It does require a little bit of time, a lot of search, and kind of figuring out areas. If you're fishing areas that I've been fishing, it's a little bit tougher when the charts and the navionics for like certain tidal creeks don't have sufficient information. To give you an example, in this video I went to 5 different creeks, and all 5 of them you cannot find a single depth or any type of information in my depth finder, like pre-charted chart or online navionics, stuff like that. So you do have to do a little bit of searching. And what was neat is some of the creeks that I've never fished before on a chart show that they're like less than a foot deep,
and I was marking holes as deep as 16 feet, which tells you that some of those areas aren't as explored. They're not really, put out there. Um, so the biggest thing that I can tell you that will help you more than anything is don't focus on finding a spot or the spot. So many guys will ask me and reach out all the time asking, "Oh, where were you? Send me the GPS, drop a pin." That's great and all, but that is not going to help you. And I'm going to explain why in a second. The reason why dropping a pin to somebody is not very helpful in general is fish move. They're like us. They don't sit still. They don't sit in one area for a long time. And one day you can go to an area and just absolutely mug fish, and then go literally the next day, same tide, an hour later, because the tide moves, and literally catch nothing. And that's why I'm trying to put this out there to help guys out that are starting out, or you're trying to figure out this fishery and you're trying to wonder why like something works one day doesn't work the other day. There's answers for that, but the biggest thing I could tell you, if you want to get good at this and you want to like really hone in on striped bass, you have to do your homework. You have to spend time on Google Earth or some type of platform looking at areas that could potentially hold fish. I'm going to show you what I do and what I look for. All that homework you do off the water, you got to apply when you get on the water. And I could tell you right now, out of those 5 creeks I went to, only 2 of them had fish the days that I filmed this video. So some days you're going to go to an area that in theory should be the spot to go to. It's got everything that you're looking for, has the right tidal exchange, has enough depth, has checks all the boxes, but there's no fish there. Well, that's fishing, man. The one thing I found with stripers is a lot of times they are moving around trying to forage, especially in the colder months when there's a little less bait around. It's mostly shrimp, minnows, and random bunker that are still in the bay. Those fish are foraging around. It's not like you're pulling up to a blitz and fish are just feeding like crazy. So let's take a look at the map. I'm going to pull up some random creeks that I've been looking at on Google Earth that will give you a little bit of insight into what I'm looking at.
All right, so let's take a deep dive into this Google Earth map. This body of water is a random body of water that I've never fished before. I just picked a random one. That way, I took all the identifying characters off of it because the name of the river and the creeks off of this mean nothing in my opinion. What means more is the information I'm about to give you. So if I'm going to be deep diving into an area that I've never fished before, I do try to find, a creek somewhat like this. It's got multiple bends, has like an area that there might be a big current break here, depend on, how much tide pushes through. But why these areas typically produce fish in the, colder months is when that water temp drops and there's, most of the migratory bait fish are gone. What's left are, mama chugs, minnows, shrimp, other little, bait fish that these striped bass, typically go in these creeks to forage on. In fact, this little creek right here, which looks like it'd be really tough to get to, the end, probably, on an incoming tide gets plenty of bait that gets washed, up this creek. And on the outflow of that, tidal exchange, you usually will find fish sitting at these mouths waiting for that bait fish just to get pushed out by the tide. You want to do when you're looking into a new creek, focus on finding areas with significant structure like points, drop offs, deep channels within the creek. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes creeks like these won't have information that you could find online, and the only way to really find out is to go put in the time on the water. Um, I could tell you that without a doubt in my mind, Navionics does not have all these creeks mapped out. Some of the ones I fished in this video, like I stated earlier, literally have no information online, but have really interesting and intriguing parts of them, like deep drop offs, as deep as like 30 feet, which is kind of crazy that that's not on a chart. But I digress. Let's get back to uh, finding the right spot. So we're going to look at this creek specifically, this big one right here. But anywhere that you're going to see these bends, typically there is usually some type of current break on the other side of it. So on an incoming tide, tide's pushing up, you're probably going to find a break here, right where the land sticks out. Um, Typically, striped bass are, and most fish in the colder months are, low metabolism, trying to burn the least amount of energy, and they're sitting in these areas that don't have a heavy current flow that's going to require them to have to, work really hard to stay in place. And it's actually a really good ambush spot for when bait is getting, thrusted in with the tide. So as we talk about tide, you do want to pay attention to this tide cycle. Um, Stripers definitely move with the tide and, use it to their advantage when they're trying to find areas to feed. If you find a creek like this and you figure out which way the tide's moving and where those, specific areas that you want to target fish will be, the biggest thing is presenting the lure naturally. So if it's an incoming tide, right, tide's pushing this way, the way the cursor's moving, what I would do if I were in this scenario, I would hug this bank as long as you're, have enough water to hug that area. And I would try and set up right about here so that I could cast towards this point or past this point and have the bait or my lure naturally coming with the tide. I'm not saying that stripers won't hit your bait if it's going against the tide. I just think it will up your chances of a hookup and it looks much more natural. Um, I've caught them both ways, but I have seen a significant, upswing in hookups when I'm fishing with the tide, especially in a creek that looks at, very, very small. You might be something that's as simple as, not flying up a creek and just taking your time to get to the areas that you're going to be fishing, because I do find that stripers can be a little spooky in shallower water. Typically, I find 15 feet or less, if you're, blowing through or plowing through a creek right before you fish it, it's probably not the greatest idea. Um, the other thing is trying to strategically set up where you're going to be, where you're not going into an area that might have fish. So if I'm entering this creek and I want to focus on fishing the mouth first, I'll, position myself outside of this area, make a few casts. If we don't get anything, then I'll start to explore other areas. But I see a lot of times where guys will just fly through a creek, go all the way up and then not catch anything up here and then work their way back and not have the success that you might have if you work your way in, if you get what I'm saying. Two methods that I would fish in this creek specifically would be, the one we spoke about earlier about casting and retrieving. So you're kind of working your bait higher in the water column at a continuous motion. The other option, now, and I've never fished this creek that I'm showing you, but if I were to go explore this creek and found, like deeper holes or deeper drop offs, ledges that, look like they would hold fish, I would probably try and set up, up up current of them and drift over jigging. For instance, if we still have that incoming tide, and I know that, maybe around this bend here, it goes from 7 feet down to 20. Um, Typically, that's an area you're going to find fish, especially in the winter months. I'll probably set up right about here and let the boat just get pushed or kayak right over that hole naturally. Um, Typically, that'll give you your best chance at hooking up with a fish. Now, remember, every spot that you explore might not be the home run that you're hoping to hit. I can't tell you how many times I've been on the water And, I do all this research. I look at all these maps. I try and find the best area to go fish. And I, put it to work, go to those areas, and there's literally nothing. That does not mean that those fish aren't ever going to be there. It just means they're not there at that current moment. It's one of those things, if something's not working, don't keep doing it over and over again, hoping. Like a certain area, like if this point that we talked about earlier, I'll probably throw 5, 6 casts. If I don't catch a thing out of those 6 casts, that kind of tells you what you need to know. Typically, if those fish are there and you're presenting the bait correctly, they will feed. Um, Same goes for if you're doing the jigging technique that I talked about, where you're just drifting over. Unless you're physically marking the fish and not catching them, I wouldn't waste too much time doing the same drifts over and over again if they're not producing, because that means one of two things. Either A, the fish are not there, or B, you're not presenting the bait in a manner that they want to feed. Now, this is the first time I've ever done one of these like spot dissections or breakdowns. If you enjoyed this type of video, please let me know. I'm always looking to try different things and help you guys out. Thank you again for watching, and have a great day.